Everybody to another. Welcome everybody to another F.L.O.W Presents. 1 second, please. Having technical difficulty. Series, vote or not. We're going to talk about this entire month, politics and a whole bunch of stuff. But this week we're going to start off with voting. As you can see, we have our F.L.O.W team members. You've seen us all moderating in some capacity, but we are now going to engage in conversation. Hopefully we'll keep it clean. We'll keep it honest and fun. You guys have been a part of our meetings, so you're about to see something for real and live. We just want to praise God for the show even being able to start. We've had some technical difficulties, so we thank you for those who are still choosing to tune in with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel with everyone. We are really trying to make sure that the message is spread as far and wide as possible. All right, everybody. So I want to introduce the team, give them a chance to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with my lovely wife, and then we'll go across to whoever pop comes out next. So I'm Rob Harris. I'm going to be kind of moderating today, and this is
Susan Harris.
Who next, y'all? Come on.
Hi, I'm Chandra.
Monique.
Hi guys, I'm Alexia.
And I believe we have Simone who's joining us out from where she is.
In the boonies.
In the boonies. And we'll have Araba will be joining us soon. So, all right, my team. I know we prepped on this topic, but I'm gonna be real honest with you guys. I don't know if I shared this story. So the first time I actively voted aware of what was happening in the voting process was for Obama. So I'm gonna be honest with you guys. And so like I was a whole man at that point. And that is the first time I was even conscious of what was happening in the political arena, even like in any way mindful of what was going on in the world around me. And therefore I decided to vote. But here's the thing, right? When I went into that booth, as I remember, I honestly just went down the line, started off with Obama. Like that's the only name that I knew. I knew Biden because, you know, he was his vice president. Everything after that was just Democrat, just down. Like I just went Democrat down. And so here's my question to start off, right? When was the first time you were conscious of voting and what did it look like? Whoever wants to answer that.
So I'll jump in there. The first time I ever voted was in the 2004 elections with George Bush and Al Gore. And that's the year that they had the recount vote because of Florida. And I was actually living abroad at the time. So I did the whole absentee ballot thing. So the organization that I was working for, they were very good about making sure that we were all registered, that we got our ballots from the different states that, you know, we were registered in and got that information. So honestly, if it wasn't because of them being able to kind of spearhead that, I don't think I would have voted until, you know, I got back to the US and the next time I was able to vote in 2008, which would have been for Obama. And that was just specifically for the presidential elections. I think now that I'm more kind of cognizant about everything, I really want to focus more on kind of like the local elections. Because yes, presidential elections are important, but you know, who's the mayor, who's the police chief, who are our senators and congressmen, you know, because they're part of the legislative branch, which drafts the bills and makes the laws. So for me, you know, the presidential election is very important, but I'm also trying to educate myself more on the local elections moving forward.
So you actually, the first time you voted you weren't even in the country when you voted.
Nope.
It's pretty dope. Who else? When's the first time you really voted, if you have?
I still haven't really voted by your standard yet. So the first time I voted was, and the only time I voted actually, was the 2016, the last presidential election, because I was 18, so I was able to vote for the first time. And I was like, I'm just gonna vote because I can, like, don't really know what's happening here, but yeah, I'm gonna use my right. But now I guess I'm getting more educated in it, but before it was just like, I have the right to do it, so I'm gonna do it.
Honest, first time at 18. Araba, thanks for joining us. Everybody knows Africa's Muse, also the host of Black Speak, and one of our popular moderators. We were all voting for president. When was the first time you voted?
Like Monique, the first time I voted, was for Obama's second term. By that time, I was old enough to vote. I believe I was in college at the time. And it was super duper important to me to vote because I'm going to be honest, if Obama wasn't who he was, I would not have voted for that presidential election. But it was important to me to vote because not only was I exercising my right, but I truly believed in the candidate at that time. I believed he was the best person for the position. So it was historical for me, but it was also political in the sense that I definitely backed and stood behind a lot of his policies. So,
Lexi, what about you? When was the first time you really voted? Okay. Yeah.
So, well, honestly, again, okay, honestly, for me, voting has always been like, because the political atmosphere in Jamaica has always been crazy, and recently they just, done their election. So knowing about voting has always been something that was expected or taught culturally, but I never really took an active interest, to be honest, in the American elections until maybe the recent years. I never necessarily felt a part of the I felt like I had a reason. Maybe it's because I'm an immigrant. I never really felt like I was a part or I made a difference in the American election. And I didn't have, when you don't have citizenship, you really can't vote anyway. So that plays a part in that. So, which is probably why I never really took part in the American elections for a long time. So that's kind of my experience with that.
Susan, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hi, Susan.
Hey, so I was, the jealousy on this side is real. I was just gonna say that I think the first time that I remember voting was for Obama. I voted for Obama in 2008, and then again when he ran in 2012. And before that, I think what really turned me on to politics was the whole Bush-Gore situation. I think that's when I realized how dirty politics is.
So I find it interesting, right? For many of us, the first active time we were voted was not too long ago in terms of years. And what I'm interested in, y'all, what about Obama do you think made it easier to vote? I mean, I have my thoughts, but I wonder for y'all, like, what about Obama made us want to be involved in politics when before that we wasn't really about that life?
To be honest, he was Black.
Yeah, I agree with Susan. He was Black, and
that's where I started. He was Black, and it was an historic event. And also, one of the biggest things that I really liked about him is that he galvanized young people. Like he was like the first president or candidate to make you feel like your vote really mattered. And he used young people in his campaign.
And I just want to add on to what Susan said. Not only was he Black, but he wasn't like the Ben Carson type of Black or the Omarosa type of Black or the Clarence Thomas type of Black, where you're Black on the outside, but on the inside, I'm a little iffy about where you grew up. And I just think that Obama, to me, you know me, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say, and it is what it is. But I think Obama had this charismatic, genuine character that we knew that we could trust him. He spoke a lot about what change that we needed and what he could bring. Not specifically for, and this is just my opinion, and you guys could disagree or what have you, but I don't think he specifically spoke to us as Black people. He didn't necessarily come up with policies that would uniquely impact the Black population. However, I think, you know, we just held dear to this ideology that our ancestors have fought so long for a Black man to be in position. And maybe if a Black man is in office, then that would automatically mean that Black people would advance and do better in society. So
I'm about to make some people feel old real quick. So I was not able to vote for Obama. I was in 6th grade.
Great.
Yeah, I was in middle school.
I don't feel old. I just feel like you were really young, Monique.
I was in middle school, but I remember, so the middle school I went to, we had to wear uniform, and it was the day of his inauguration. Like, they made everyone come in with like Obama shirts, and we all like took off school just to watch the inauguration. So that just goes to say, I think at least for my community, like in Brooklyn and stuff, it was definitely the Blackness.
Was somebody gonna say something real quick?
Oh.
Go ahead, Lexi.
Okay. Okay. So I also wasn't able to vote, probably due to my age, probably, and also you know, citizenship reasons. But I agree with Araba in the sense of, because it was because it was a historical moment, that I would, because it was a historical moment, not necessarily because I saw or I heard things, because for most Black people were very aware of, you know, the process at that time, but specifically because of Obama was in there. So even though I was younger, I was very conscious of everything that was happening. Like Araba, I didn't think he specifically spoke to or for Black people. So that was honestly one of the problems that I had with, because he's generally, the Democratic candidates, they do have a charismatic personality. Obama have a little extra because he's Black. But generally that's how Democratic candidates are, and that's how they have a particular speech and how they deliver messages and how they appeal to certain things. So if I had the ability to vote, I probably would vote because of culture, but not necessarily because he had some policies for Black people that I thought he was about to bring this, you know, great change than any other candidate has brought.
Here's my question to y'all with that in mind. Do you think we're too, like, are we blindly loyal? Like, when we consider voting for Barack, like what Araba and Alexia talked about, well, many of I think about it too. Like, he wasn't very explicit about, like, yo, I'm gonna make sure all the Black folk get reparations. I'm gonna make sure that our communities don't have cops killing each other. It wasn't like he was pro-Black in anything directly. Now we can see his after presidency and what he's done afterwards to let us know that he has always been for the Black community. But in presidency, he wasn't, you know, really supporting us overtly like that. And we all voted for him anyway. But does that say, like, how knowledgeable are we about policies that really support our community and who we vote for? Like, I'm curious to know how many of y'all really understand, when you vote for somebody for the time that you do, what it is that they're going to do for you and your community.
I think what happened is that with Obama, and it's more so people thought their homeboy was coming into office, right? So it's like, oh, my homeboy, he's getting elected, he's going to take care of everything for us, but not really thinking about, well, what's the larger picture? What is it that really needs to happen in order for me to succeed and make it to the next level? So when he did things that were done, that were for the larger community or for the country, it was like, well, this doesn't affect me directly, because they weren't seeing maybe money being put directly into their hand and into into their pocket. So people felt like, oh, Obama wasn't really for us. I don't know. That's my thought on it.
Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking to answer your question about like, do we really know what we're voting for? I would say, speaking from personal experience, no. Like, unfortunately, I in the past have just said, you know what, this person is Democrat. I'm gonna vote for Democrats because historically Republicans have been, extremely conservative and most times racist, overtly racist. And I'm not saying that there's no racism in the Democratic Party, because we do have racism in the Democratic Party. But what I am saying is, I think that a lot of times when I voted, I cared about who was president. And so I would pay attention to that and their politics. But there's also there are other offices or positions that are on the ballot, and I wouldn't pay attention to what their stances are and what their policies were. I would just vote because there was a Democrat by their name. Now, if there was more than one Democrat, Democratic name, when you were looking at like Senate and things like that, I was just, to be honest, doing an eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Or if it was a woman, I'm more likely to vote for the woman because she's a woman. And so, yeah, to answer your question, no.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a little bit of a different circumstance, because I agree with what everyone has been saying so far. But so I majored in political science, and I guess like a lot of my classmates, we were very into that, like making sure we were aware of what candidates at that time offered to the public. However, I think those who are still informed of the policies of these candidates, yes, they might not offer the things that we've been asking for, but sometimes we often feel as though we have no other choice. It's either vote for the Black guy who's like a little bit better than the other candidate who, I don't know, his ancestors probably made my ancestors pick cotton or something. Like, I feel like sometimes we know that these candidates don't offer what we need and what we're asking for, but oftentimes we feel like we have to pick the lesser of two evils. So I don't think it's necessarily us not being truly informed on who we're voting for, but sometimes feeling as though I'd rather go with the devil I do know than the devil I don't know. But I'm not going to say that's for everyone. I think it's just for some people. That's just my opinion.
With that, Araba, too, it's just like, I think even now, like me personally, I'm torn, because on the one hand, you're like, my ancestors fought for this, right? Like they tried so hard just to be able to vote. But then on the other hand, it's like, now that I can vote, like, what are my options if I don't like those? So I'm torn, honestly.
But let's be honest. How much of us right now, right, knows the policies of both parties?
I do.
You know most of the policies that you're about to vote on.
I know a good deal.
Okay, all right. So what are some of the policies?
For Obama, I knew everything, but for this one,
now I'm saying for this election, we're not talking about Obama. This election,
I was referring to Obama. That's
okay, but I'm saying, but in general, like a lot of times when elections get so heated and when the Black vote is being demanded, or like being kind of just like, they're doing the most for the Black vote, doing the most, and that's really just begging for our votes, really, because they beg for the votes, and they don't have a plan. Right? So what is the lesser of two evils? Somebody calling me out of my name in front of my face, or somebody calling me out of my name behind my back? What is the lesser of two evils? Somebody not having a plan and pretending like they have a plan, or somebody explicitly saying, I don't got a plan? That's my question.
Hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I see that. To Araba, like, I think what Araba said is interesting in terms of people voting for the lesser of two evils. I would be curious to know, because I think that might be true of the presidency, but we have local elections. And I would be curious to know how many of us actually pay attention and vote in local elections. How many of us are aware of who's running in our local elections? I have a hunch that a lot of us, at least people that I know, are not, you know? And so I don't even think we know what the lesser of two evils are. Some of us, I won't speak for people in here who are more aware of those things. But, you know, if I were to have a conversation with 10 of my coworkers right now, I would say maybe like 2 out of 10 of them would know the names of the people running for DC Council or running for, right, you know what I'm saying? And so, you know, although we're looking at the higher ups, I think one of the things that we need to pay attention to is, or like one of the big questions is like, what do we know about the people that are running locally? What do we know about their politics, about their stances, and how they support businesses in our community and the underprivileged people in our communities? I don't think that a lot of us know that stuff, and I don't know how many of us are even want to know. You know, I think a lot of us focus more on the presidency and even Senate, you know, even the Senate, but not so much the local mayor, you know?
So what it sounds like is, to Monique's point, we end up having to decide between the devil we know and don't know because of our lack of involvement at the lower levels that lead us to a point where, okay, so this person may have been a crappy mayor, now they're vying for presidency, but our two options are the open Christian racist or the closet liberal racist, and both of them, neither of them may support any views that support me as an individual. At least that's what I think I'm hearing. So then how do we get it? Like, what do we do from this point, right? That's my thing. Because I gotta be honest with y'all, I've been trying to track, I have not just been trying, I've been tracking this presidency and this election, and I'm scared. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm scared. Biden at first came out real strong. Okay, he about to be, you know, the people's choice, right? He wrote one of our people so we can support him. But sadly, the more he talks, the more I'm concerned about what our country will look like. And it's not even just our country. What I am invested in is beyond this idea of, okay, so you may not tweet every 5 seconds about something racial, right? Or you may not say something ignorant, but how are you supporting me and my growing family? Like, what policies are you going to do? And as I listen to him, I think his moderate ways, at least the things that he's about to support, aren't really going to help set us as a people any further than really where Trump did. Like, at the end of the day, Trump's push for money and economy actually benefited more people in some ways than some of the more liberal views that the Democrats support. But my thing is, I also can't support Trump because he's stupid, like, he's crazy, right? And we can use his platform to say that, but there's nothing, how he leads morally impacts our lives physically, because his leadership is going to result to me even more murders being going without conviction, right? Going without even being tried. And so I don't know if that's facts, Lexi, but I'm concerned. I feel like he's not helping the issue right now. Like, he's stoking the fires of division. Go ahead, Araba.
I hear what you're saying, Rob, and I agree. But I think, and you said, what do we do? That was your question, right? So my thing to Black people specifically is, it's either you vote for Biden, right? Or you revolutionize. Because what other options do we have? Do we not vote for him and then let the chips fall where they may and then be stuck with more years of uncertainty? What do we do? Like, we either have to be ready to say, screw the system, period. We're not voting for either of you and we are going to do our own thing, or just go with either of the choices. I really don't see any other option but truly revolutionizing. So that's just my opinion. I feel like that's the only way we're going to get real change, and the change that we want as people, because they're not listening and they're not going to give it to us. We know Joe Biden is not going to give it to us. But again, like it was said earlier, he's just a lesser of two evils. So that's the option that we feel that we have, like, for the right now. So.
But I think some of what they're saying also kind of speaks to Susan's point from earlier about knowing who are the local officials. You know, who's running to be the sheriff, who's running to be on the Board of Education, you know, because these are the things that will directly impact us here and in our communities. So, you know, obviously with everything that's going on with police forces across the nation, you know, in DC earlier this week, there was a shooting in Southeast of a Black male. So it's like, what do we do? How do we impact change? I think it comes with truly knowing and understanding who are these people in the local community that are setting up the police force policies, you know, like in DC and in different counties within Maryland. What are the training practices? Is it just 6 weeks? And then if you're, I don't know, like 21, you get a gun and then you're on the police force? Should we be fighting for stronger things about, well, you need to, you know, just like we do for lawyers and doctors and architects and engineers, they have to go through this rigorous process. They have to have continual educational credits in order to maintain, you know, their licenses. Why don't we do that for the police on the police force? I mean, maybe that exists in some counties or maybe it doesn't in others. You know, if somebody loses their law license or their medical license, it's probably almost impossible to try and get it in another place. Whereas if a police officer gets fired in one county, they can go to the next county and get hired. So I think we have to look at these things from a very, you know, yes, we have the higher up with the presidential, which is important, but we have to look at the minute details as well and look at what are the things that are directly impacting me. I don't have any children right now, but, you know, on the elections, the last time I remember they had for the Board of Education, I was like, I honestly don't want to pick anybody because I don't know what their policies are. And I don't know if that's better than just not voting at all, you know, picking somebody versus not voting, because I'm like, this could be impacting my neighbors and the funding that their kids get, because I'm like, I'm not informed because I don't have kids. So, but that's on me. So I think it is about educating ourselves at the local level as to what it is that is going to be directly impacting us. And then how does that trickle up to the senators, the congressmen, and then to the presidential policies as well? Because the president might come forth and want to put all this stuff together, like the CARES Act and different things, but if it doesn't get passed in, you know, in the Senate, that kind of stuff, then it's not going to go. So we have to kind of start, I think, from the bottom and work our way up.
Yeah, and to your point, Chandra, it starts with knowing what the structure is, what our country structure is. You know, because like you said, the president can put together whatever bills and acts he wants to or present them to Congress, and they can shoot it down. It's happened to Obama. It's happening to President Trump right now. And so it's not just a matter of voting for president. It's about voting for your state's attorney. You know, like knowing being strategic about putting the proper people in place. So it means that we have to start doing our research and doing it like our lives depend on it.
Yeah. And I think also to that point, just quickly, the media, they feed us so much information, and it's also very skewed, and it's strictly obviously about the presidential election. So maybe we need to put some more pressure on the media to talk about, you know, who are the people that are running for police, you know, chief or sheriff, or, you know, on the Board of Education, and figure out how to get that information out there more widely to the public about the debates that are happening at that level, so that we can be involved in those discussions at that time. Whereas the media is really just focused on the presidential election, you know.
I like that idea. However, I can't put trust in the media necessarily to direct me. But I think, no, for real, because they are paid people. They have a certain agenda. They have people behind them that are pushing for a certain agenda. So I think for us, the same energy that we give when we're mobilizing, when we're talking about the presidential election, we have to give that same energy when it comes down to a local election. We have to get together in our small groups to not only educate ourselves, they have town hall meetings or whatever the case is, but we have to be intentional about being involved. Coming together, set aside a time amongst ourselves as young people if we want to be involved, researching what are the different policies, researching who is going into, even when you recently, Rob had sent me maybe like a month or so, the link to the police force. They were discussing that. It just even being on that meeting was so much information that otherwise I wouldn't have known about if I hadn't gone to that meeting when they were talking about the recent
protesting and the changes that they should make in the police force. We have to be intentional about knowing the policies that they're supporting and going out and, I mean, they have, but they're currently trying to have bus drives for people, to take people to go vote in this presidential election. We don't have the same thing for these local elections. Like Sandra said, it's affecting our school systems that our children are going into. It's affecting the our hospitals. It's affecting directly so many things. Presidential, yes, be involved, but really it should be flipped in terms of the energy that we're given the presidential election as opposed to the local election.
Or it should be equal, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, equals an argument. And we left something on the table, and I'm like, I kind of want to address it because Araba definitely threw out this idea of like, don't vote for anyone. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Like, don't vote for anyone and change the system. But Araba, now I need to know and hear from you. What does the blowback potentially look like for that, and then where do we begin? Like, you talk about being a political science major, because in my brain I go, okay, but how many of us would have to not vote in order for that lack of voting to be effective? Because if I don't vote, then that makes X person's vote for evil. We'll just air quote evil matter even more. So help me understand, like, how do you see that working, maybe, in a sense? Like, how do we radicalize the system in order to make sure that change is impactful?
I mean, well, so I can't devise a plan in a minute. But I was speaking specifically to your question about what do we do if we're not, well, correct me if I'm wrong. You asked the question of what do we do if we're not happy with the choices that we have? Is that what you asked? Yeah, and I said, I feel like I've heard this argument so many times before, and Lexi, you and I were talking about this as well some time ago, but the only way I see real change coming about is if we just do away with the system, period. I get it. I get the argument that us not voting might seem as if it's putting more power into the hands of those who are exercising their rights to vote. However, it's hard to say that we should vote anyway in order to prevent that from happening if we have yet to even think about what our worlds would look like if we just tore the system down. And when I say tear the system down, it seems very broad. I don't have the time to break it down, but I think we don't realize our power in not voting and creating instead things that we would like to see. Now, if this means, you know what? Okay, what I'm gonna do is I am going to be right back. I have a plan that I would like to share with you guys. I don't have it in front of me, but I have it written down. This is something that I've talked about in one of my classes before. So I'll be right back if you guys just give me like 5 minutes.
And we have questions for you from the chat. So when you get back, we'll love to ask you some questions from the chat.
I'll be right back.
I was gonna quickly jump in and also, okay, my bad, Simone, go ahead. What you got?
No, so I just wanted to jump in because actually, Rob, what you mentioned, I was going to ask Araba the same thing. Like, what does that mean to start a revolution? Like, how are we breaking down the system? So I'm interested to hear what she's going to come up with. But I think this whole idea of all this pressure on the presidential election and the lesser of the two evils, it makes me think about something else. So I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench in all of this. Right? Because we are all, I think all of us on this call are Adventists. We're part of the world church. And I think the same thing happens where we're complaining, individuals complain about how things function on the GC level, right? But we don't pay attention to nominating committee in our local church, local conference, local union, which also affects what happens up at GC. And the same thing translates into the broader society. If we're not paying attention to the local council members, Congress members, those people, the mayors, the sheriffs, who's going into those offices, and which in turn can lead up to presidential, then what right do we really have to say? Because we aren't to say anything because we basically dropped the ball. Like, we have not done our due diligence. People only pay attention every 4 years to election, but every November 3rd, there is an election. Like, there's someone who's being voted in, whether it's a county judge, attorney, school board president, whatever it is. So we end up with these lesser of the two evils because we haven't taken any action or real accountability for the 3 years in between.
And yo, Simone, so if you're watching us, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're a part of a church that has a structure of voting, you're still a part of the nation. And I agree with you. I think looking at my own church, at one point it hit me. I was complaining about things happening at larger levels, but the reality is I wasn't going to board meetings. Like, I didn't know what was happening even at my local church level, but then I was seeing lack of outcomes and getting upset. I think, what Chandra is saying, you're saying, and where I guess we're all kind of echoing, I think there does need to be some level of investment in local arenas. Like, before we look to try to change the world on a federal level and, make sure the Oval Office is square or circular or not at all, like, we need to understand, like Chandra said, like, do you know who your board of education members are? You don't even feel the need to campaign because it's so matter of fact that they're just going to take this position. Like, I wonder how knowledgeable we are of those levels.
But what if you feel? Oh, go ahead, Susan.
No, it's okay. We're gonna.
Now I was gonna just be like, what about if you feel like your vote doesn't matter? Like, what if you feel like your one yes or no or him or her? How is that gonna sway things? Like,
that's how we end up with Trump.
Well, hold on. So I want to jump to the chat, y'all. We got stuff in the chat. So let me, Susan, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Just really quickly. My thought was about, and I guess maybe I need to wait till Robert gets back, because with this whole, doing away with the system thing, I'm just curious to know how that would work when we live in a democracy. So it's not like we can all move to one place and say, you know what, we're not listening to the rules of the land. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. We're just going to live our own lives. Like, that's not reality. And so I'm just curious to know, like we would still have to pay taxes. We still have to, there are people above us that are making decisions.
I get that.
So I'm just, I guess, to make it clear, I'm not saying that, like, I do feel like we need to change the system and more of us need to be involved.
We fired up, y'all.
So that we can change the system. But, to hear, let's tear the system down. I'm just curious to know what that sounds like.
And
I do have a question.
And Araba and I, we talk about this a lot, but we agree in terms of like getting rid of the system. Here's why. And I use the analogy of like, because I bake a lot, if I bake and something goes wrong in the recipe of the cake, I have to throw the whole cake away, right? To restart the whole.
That's a waste of resources and food.
It doesn't matter, but the cake didn't come out how it was supposed to come out, right?
Doesn't mean it's not edible.
Robert.
Okay, just valid questions.
But my thing is, when you have a constitution, and I think, is a democracy constitution that you set that you never change? Because things, times, and people change, right? So we have something that's set in stone that was originally created with Blacks as non-humans, right? As subhumans. That's a foundation, and that's the governing thing in America for the country, right? When you have something such as that everybody's living their lives in America based off of as the Constitution, which originally at the origin, it's rotten. How is it then that you're building on something that's rotten and not then if you want effective true change, throw out the baby with the bathwater?
Hold on. We do have questions in the chat, y'all. And I want you to know, this is what it's like to have a flow meeting with the team. Let everybody know right here. So first question from the chat, as Shari Ahmed asks, why are we as young people so disengaged with local politics? Can we start there? We have another question. Why are we so, Monique, go ahead. You want to jump on that?
I feel I'm just gonna speak for myself. And it's gonna sound selfish, so sorry to say, but it's one of those things where it's like, how does my vote gonna change anything? Like, all the things that have happened, how has that affected me? Like, has that affected my daily waking up and going someplace? Well, at least with me, it hasn't. And it's like, even with the different elections that has happened over the years, it's like, I still do the same thing. Like I still wake up, I still go to school, I still go to the grocery store, I still do the same thing. So it's like.
So Monique, it sounds like from you, just recapping, I'm not jumping in, just recapping. For you, you feel like the disengagement at the local level is because you don't see the immediate impact. There is no change to your life.
Yes.
Okay. Simone and Sue.
I think there's not a change to the world. I'm just saying there's no change to my specific life.
Okay. Alexia and Susan have thoughts on that. The question is, how do we why are young people disengaged with the political process?
I think it's because like everybody has said before, we talk a lot. We hear the presidential campaigns pushed a lot more than we do the local campaigns. And I feel like a lot of us are to go further, I feel like a lot of us are not educated on the implications of who we vote for locally have on, the larger platforms. So I think if we understood how important it was to vote in the local elections and how important it was to be engaged. And even, I don't know how many people know that like in DC, there are actual like community meetings where for the different wards where you can go and you can voice your concerns, and there are different votes that happen there. A lot of us don't know these things. And, to Monique's point, a lot of us don't see the impact, but I don't think we attribute some of the things that happen in our community to local elections. I think we attribute it to what happens federally and nationally.
Yeah. I would say, I agree with Susan, and I would also say culture, as Black people, we're catching up. We're still catching up to voting, although we had the right a while ago, we're still catching up for life. And now we're catching up to understanding what voting really means, how it impacts us. So, and then the younger generation. And I would say for us, at least, most of us here are children of immigrants and stuff like that. So a lot of times our parents, weren't necessarily taught that this is their country and they should. So growing up culturally also, that plays a part into
immigrant detachment.
If that's even necessary, because culturally sometimes parents are, I'm here for one thing and I'm gonna go back home, or you're here, but it was never really taught. So we're catching up a lot on so many different sides. We're catching up, at least for me. So.
Wow, that immigrant detachment theory is something to talk about. I see that Araba's back. Right now, Araba and us, everyone, if you're joining us, welcome to another F.L.O.W Presents. I know it took a little bit to the fire to get started, but we hot now. We're kicking off our series of politics and voting or not. So in the chat, a lot of people are asking, we can all essentially agree that the system does need to be changed, but a lot of people are wondering how. And I want to start off with that comment because that was early up, and then I'm going to read some comments from Victor and some others. So Araba, people want to know.
I endorse Araba, by the way. I'm endorsing Araba.
The comment was doing away with the system. And I think that's the question where it's like, how do you do away with the
I'm sorry if I misworded the question. Someone in the chat is basically wondering how.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm back. Like I said, I'm taking a course in Black political ideology at the moment, and my professor, it's so interesting because we had this conversation about voting and what Black people should do to bring about real change, right? So we did create or devise a plan within our class, but I realized a lot of these definitions are from my professor's words. So I'm going to just give you the definition of a revolution, what we went over in class. I don't really want to say what he said because I don't have his permission, but if we do discuss this in the upcoming weeks, I'll make sure to get his permission and we could talk further about it. But so a revolution is a fundamental sudden change in political power and political organization where the population revolts against the government due to perceived oppression, right? And so this looks like creating a foundation where we come up with how we govern ourselves, what we do, in complete opposition to how it's been done, right? That a lot of people are not going to be okay with that definition. It's not something that we're used to. It's completely dismantling the system and creating a whole new one. And I get a lot of what Susan and Chandra was saying about, making sure we're informed at the local level, because that could help a lot, right? And I do believe that can. However, you do have people who still will be dissatisfied, even when we research and become more politically involved in those local elections. There still will be people who are not benefiting at that local level, right? And so what I'm speaking to specifically is doing away with that, period. What system we will put in place, that is for us to devise and create, and see what else will work for the majority, for the masses, right? Not something that we've been doing for the long run. And so I'll just leave you guys with that. That's the definition of a revolution. And we don't have to have all the answers today and right now. But what I'm speaking to specifically is people who constantly complain about how the system is not benefiting us, but do not want to think about ways and where we can just dismantle it, period, and come up with our own ways to govern ourselves that can speak to what the people need. So, and in coming weeks, I'll be happy to share the plan that we've devised. But I would like to have my professor's permission beforehand.
Appreciate that. Of course, we'd love to even have your professor if he's willing to join us, if you can. Chandra and then Susan.
So I was gonna say, I think kind of all over the place here, but like one of the questions was, how do we do something or why do we do something? And I just think back to like the bus boycotts, because I feel like when something immediately impacts people's pockets, then they start to kind of wake up and they start to take notice and they start to kind of, they're galvanized into action, right? And so with that whole thing of boycotting for about a year and how much money the bus system lost, then they started to listen, and that's when a policy change, happened. So, sadly, green makes this world turn. And so if you look at, the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's been happening recently, when we look at, we were talking about, let's not support, X, Y, and Z corporation and this business and that business. And those companies immediately then jumped on this bandwagon of, we support Black lives and we're donating 15% of our profits to, Black entrepreneurs and all this other kind of stuff, because they realize the value that we as a collective have. And if we as a collective voice decide to make a shift in that, that's when something fundamentally is going to be lost. And so things need to change. So I think one way in which we can look at kind of dismantling the system, and to Araba's point, like doing something that works for us is, you look at these policies and you're like, well, how is that impacting me? But when they change tax codes and you have to pay more in your property tax, or you have to pay more in your income tax, that impacts you. That takes money out of your pockets. So you need to be informed as to who's talking about these tax things and what does this mean? Because when they talk about, the X percent, well, all of us on here, we're not in that 1% level yet, but it's like, those are the kinds of things that are going to be impacting us. So we need to look at how do we get informed about that, but then also galvanize and revolutionize as a group to make policies and make things that help us, keep more of the sacrifices that we're putting out into, for the good of other people and whatever kind of business that you're doing or work that you're doing, so that we have more to support, to patronize our Black businesses and that sort of thing. So I think that's one way of doing things. When it starts to impact pockets, I think people start to listen and you can move forward in that.
So I agree with what Chandra is saying, and I had two points. One was, I've heard the word changing the system and dismantling the system, and I'm trying to figure out if we're using those terms interchangeably, or if one is, changes in policies, and the other one is, like Alexia said, throw the whole Constitution away and start from the bottom and work your way up. Because that changes my opinion on what the conversation is. That's number one. And number two, the issue with the suggestion to me is that Black people, and I am sorry about how this is going to come off, we don't know what the hell we want. And so you have some people that are saying one thing, another set of people that are saying something completely different. And so sitting everybody in a room, like look at how divided people are on voting right now. You have celebrities talking about, if he's not doing something for the Black person, we're not voting at all. Then you have another group of people saying you need to vote because our ancestors fought for it. But for some reason, we just don't seem to be on the same page about things. And so I think before we even talk about dismantling anybody's system, we got to be on the same page. And I don't think we're there yet. That's just my personal opinion.
Woo! Oh, wow.
Can we get there? Like, can we all get on the same page if we have varying educational levels, varying economic levels, you know what I mean? All of that. Because the thing is that everybody's interest is going to be very different, because there are people, celebrities that have, this millions of dollars, and Trump's policies have benefited them economically, whereas they don't benefit me. So it's like, how do we get on that same page when there's such disparity in how we are as a society already?
Someone wants to jump in here, and then
I agree with Chandra. Like, we can't even agree on the fact that police should be prosecuted for shooting an unarmed Black man. Like, there's some of them are like, well, was he out late at night? Was he doing it? I heard there was a knife in the car under his driver's seat mat, and it's like, but he didn't have it on him. The cops had no right to shoot him in his back 7 times. So if we can't even figure out like which police officers should be prosecuted, how the heck are all Blacks going to come together to decide how we're going to move forward with a political system? Like Susan was saying, like, it's, I don't even know. It doesn't make any sense, because people have different agendas. Like, if my pockets, going back, Monique was saying, things, she wasn't affected directly. I know I was affected with this last president, because my tax return, where I went from getting money, like a decent amount of chump change, I could actually put down on something. Now I owe these suckers money. Like, things changed. So I know I've seen changes. So I couldn't, I won't put myself on.
Okay, so again, I told you it was gonna get hot, y'all. We have some questions in the chat that I want to address. And then I'm gonna throw the monkey wrench in here after these a couple of questions. So, wow. So there was mention of voting for the third party, right? And we talked about voting and the need to vote, and someone mentioned voting for the third party. So there's a question here that says, is voting for a third party to voice defiance the same as none voting, since the third party has a low possibility of winning the candidacy? It seems to boil down to choosing the lesser of two evils. What do you guys think about that? Like,
if it's an educated vote, how dare anybody says to someone, don't do that? Because the whole point of you fighting for the right to vote is to make an educated vote. So if you are the person who can sit there and tell me the policies, most Black people that I've talked to don't know the policies, presidential and local, but you can tell me, go vote, right? You can tell me, go vote for Biden, or go vote for somehow Kamala, best friend Biden right now. You can tell me to go do that, but you can't tell me what's the policies that you're voting for. But somebody who made an educated choice to vote independent or whatever, and they can tell you for facts why they're voting, it doesn't matter. That's their choice, educated or not. So not educated or not, but educated, they're making that vote. So I really don't agree with that, and I think that's very offensive. Also, they still haven't arrested Breonna Taylor police.
And so what Alexia is trying to say is, if you want to vote for Kanye,
no, that's not what I'm saying. But let people.
You heard it here first. Alexia is supporting the vote for Kanye.
So Lexi, that is what you said, though. No, Lexi, that is what you said, because if somebody goes and they make a point for Kanye, and they're like, well, you know what? He does seem like the more viable option right now. I'm gonna vote for him.
But Simone, does Kanye have policies? That's a different conversation. Let's not. Okay, let's.
No, it's the same thing.
Hold on, because we all can't hear.
Let's not gaslight the conversation. Let me say this. No, let me say this. If you, the whole point of you voting, and we are debating voting, is to make educated decision. Is it just to vote, or is it to make educated vote?
Hold on, but I think what Simone is saying, to your point, if someone, to your argument, can say to you, I would vote for Kanye
if he has policies, but does Kanye have policies
regardless
right
of
now?
his policies, what if he's going to, right? What if they believe his
then
morals? Okay, so you're okay with that.
If
basically,
he has policies, but we're talking about quality. Come on now, guys.
Okay, so Simone was first.
What you said, you just said it, Lexi. I'm just supporting what you said. I'm gonna vote for Kanye because you know what? What he says makes sense.
The reason why we should do away with the system, period, is because Kanye should not even be given a reason to vote. Running.
Oh, whoa,
That's
whoa,
exactly
whoa,
why
whoa,
we should.
whoa.
He should not be given the opportunity to run for presidency.
Roll back.
Why not?
I need to. I would
What?
love. I would
Really?
love.
Why not?
Let's
No,
pivot.
He's an American
we should
citizen.
change the way that our system for running for presidency works.
I can't hear.
Like if you look at other countries, it's like whoever gets the most
I
votes
know you guys.
win, and then you get to the next level. But our whole thing with like, you know, electoral colleges and all this other kind of stuff, like
I need.
your point, you're right.
So I gotta
That's
be real
probably why
honest.
we have issues in the police force because anybody can get a.
Which is true.
Okay.
Which is true.
Okay.
But here's
why
the
we
thing.
have okay.
So anyone can go to medical school too? Like, I just don't understand why this system is broken. This system is so broken.
Nobody's disagreeing with that. Nobody's disagreeing with the fact that the system is broken.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things in the chat. I feel like we can get off the tangent, but I don't want to take my privilege as a moderator. I won't do that. I feel that there is some bit of contradiction and hypocrisy in determining how one should vote based on what we believe about them. Because to your point, Alexia, I kind of want to say, if someone can, if Kanye puts out, like, the fact that Trump is in the presidential White House, to me, says that I really can't even come for Kanye's neck, because Trump got there. So why can't Kanye? But let me jump to something else, right? Because we're all Christian here, and I want to challenge every Christian, and I want to challenge every person here. How are we so passionate about a system that we believe at multiple levels is difficult to change and throw out, but we're not willing to be active in our own local church, particularly the Adventist denomination? And you heard it here first. We talking about it as real as it is about F.L.O.W. And we still have things like racism in our own denomination. We still have things like classism and separation. Why are we not as involved in our local churches? Like, if we can enact change in our own local church, why do we feel like we have the privilege and power to enact it in the federal level? And we have way more power. We have way more power than local church. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Araba.
I said the system in the church is just as corrupt.
Same thing.
I'll just leave on
Did
that.
you call him?
And you got a shake head from Simone too.
And with that, she goes on mute.
But here's the thing, though. If you believe that, why are we not enacting the same level of change?
Does our vote really
But the
matter
question
to
is,
the little people? And we talked about this, you guys. So be honest.
Oh, well, I didn't hear what you said in the Chandra. I want to hear what you said in the Chandra. Say it so we can.
I said, does our vote as the little people matter in the church? And we talked about this. So please be honest, guys.
I will, but Chandra, go ahead first. I'm gonna answer you, but let Chandra go.
Because you asked, like, why are we not as vocal? I know that I've been very vocal over the past couple of years in the business meetings that I've been to as to what I would like to see happen, or things, or even when business meetings should be held, or, you know, just simple things like that, because I feel like the church continues to pander to the older generation, you know, kind of those that helped establish, as opposed to they've allowed, you know, and I'm generalizing here, they've allowed young people to kind of step in and change things about the worship service and about praise team and different things like that. But when it comes to the business of running the church, it is still the status quo. So when I look at, you know, conversations around how our tithe and offering should be used, you know, I'm like, I want to have those conversations when we have the majority of the church members present, and not wait until 9 o'clock at night when it's the same 50 people that, you know, don't have any other plans or don't have young children or other things and can still be at church. My thing is, if I voice my opinion and I've said certain things that to be able to capture a growing populace within the church that do have the financial means to contribute more in their tithe than in their offering, but that aren't being listened to, those people, and you've seen it happen, they end up leaving the church, starting their own church, and, you know, taking their money and doing what works for them. And so then you have people like, well, why isn't the church growing? Why aren't there any more young people in the church? It's like, because you're not listening to what the young people need and what they want. So and to your point, Rob, if we can't even get, you know, our elders in the church, and I don't mean the position of elder, I mean, you know, the older generation in the church, to listen to what it is that our generation wants and what we want to do, I feel like we're at an impasse. We're kind of stuck. And that's why you're seeing kind of the growth and the outspurt of a lot of new churches of just kind of young people within that age range.
and I don't want to isolate a lot of our viewers who may be a Christian or non-Christian or of a different denomination, because I think the issue of involvement in churches mirrors involvement in politics. What I want to draw the light to, I think there's a mentality that, as we're talking about impacts Blacks in voting, that I think impacts young Christians in voting for their church. The reality is the structure of the church is very similar to a democratic structure. It is based on popular vote. To your point, Chandra, the reality is, and I have a fellow elder there in the chat who is also a young person who's also an elder. We went to a meeting where the average age for the persons at that meeting were, I'm gonna be real generous. I'm being real generous when I say maybe 45. I really want to say 50. And the makeup was male. Now, these individuals were at this meeting to vote. No, they were Black. To vote for things that would happen in our church at large. You know why we weren't there? Let me go a step back. The meeting that voted for people to go to that meeting, myself and the elder were the only other young adults there. We weren't there because I think there's a mentality that says, to your point, Chandra, that they won't listen to us. But just like in democracy, numbers rule out. Like at the end of the day, numbers rule out. If we overwhelm, even with a miscount, if we overwhelm the ballot with numbers, like we did at Obama, there won't have to be a recount. It won't be like, oh, well, maybe we missed 2 voices. Because 2 is different from 2,000. And I think if we were to really flood these arenas where we can be heard, we would see change. But here's the thing, though, I'm gonna call it out. It means inconveniencing your comfort for a brief moment. It means, to what Monique said, it means thinking beyond your immediacy. Because some people may actually be cool with what a praise team is, or may be cool with the policies because it's not impacting them directly. But can you be empathetic for your neighbor or for your community, right? Can you think, Chandra, to your point, can you think about the person that does have kids, even if you don't, and what that means for them?
So I hear everything that you're saying. And
that means a challenge.
Like,
there's a challenge.
No, because I think that like you're starting with, you know, that these people were all male, majority of them were male. Well, there's your problem, right? A lot of the
but they were there.
No. Hear me out. What I'm saying is, a lot of the issues start in the church with the structure of the church. How a lot of the people who were in charge are male and older, and they're the ones that have the most influence. Right? That's part of the problem for me. The other issue for me is that I feel like, you know, to Chandra's point, whenever we've, you know, tried to speak out about some things, and times that I've come to the business meeting and spoken out, people are like, oh, that's cute, especially when I was younger. Oh, that's cute. But they weren't hearing anything that I had to say. My voice did not matter. And you know, you're paralleling the church to our society. Listen, I shouldn't have to fight in my own church too. And I think that's a frustration of mine. I already got to fight with Millie and Joe in the community. Why do I have to fight in church?
And I someone asked in the chat, everyone out here, and I'll speak for myself first. Someone says, why are we relating Adventism / the church to the political state of the US? And I'll say because we believe there are similarities. Like there are things that need Simone look confused.
Because
sorry.
Because there's politics in the church.
Sorry, I'm gonna let some other people go. But I want to answer for me. I see there's a mirror. I see that in the church, there are things that are allowed to continue to exist because of the lack of involvement, particularly from young adults and young people. And as we're debating now, there's a why behind that. I believe that there is truth to what is being said. The status quo for so long is male, right? Is older. And if it's not male, then it's just older person, you know, above 50. But the thing is, I think we're having this conversation here as young adults to inform all of us that we have power, right? To Araba's point, I don't know if I'm there yet, but we technically have the power to overthrow the system if we wanted to. I think that we have power even to vote and change policy on a local level. But how much are we realizing that power? And I think that's my frustration. That's my coming into my mid-30s feeling real strong in myself. Like, yo, I got power. I need to be utilizing it. Like, I can make sure that X person sitting on the board of education ensures that every classroom or every school has a minimum number of Black teachers. Like, I legitimately, I believe so. I legitimately feel like we have the power to do so, but we don't exercise it. And I think that's a mentality for me. And that's the counselor in me. I feel like there's a mental block that we have yet to get over that limits our ability to exercise this power. but I don't know if someone else wants to answer. Whoa. I see the correlation that's being made, but stick to the topic. Okay, at G Barfi, my response to you is the topic's about voting or not. And I think whether it's in the church or in the federal
It's
state,
still important.
it's still about voting. So, I mean, that's me keeping it a buck with you.
So vote or not.
And just let everybody know, we're still gonna have the overflow. We're gonna do it at around 5:50 to overflow. So we've talked about a lot. I'm gonna do my best to recap and then give somebody else space to drop knowledge. So we were talking about this idea of voting or not and really looking at our political structure as it is and realizing that young adults and particularly Black young adults, and I wanna make it even more specific, Black immigrant or Black young adults of immigrant parents have been reluctant in engaging in the political process. And that exists both in the church arena and in the political arena. And so we're trying to have this conversation about how do we do things differently? Like, how do we get ourselves involved? Some things out there. Both for Robert and Lexi. I wasn't gonna vote for Robert for president. I don't know, I'm a little scared now. They say
you got my vote.
They say throw the whole system out.
But if we don't have the system, then do we have a president? Do we have a leader? Or is it just everybody for themselves?
Guys,
No, we talked about this.
There's no president.
I know her
that's what
policy.
I'm saying. But I was speaking to the people who continuously say they're displeased with the system. Get rid of it. That's all I'm saying.
Right?
Because it's so easy to get rid of something without giving them an
Who
alternative.
also don't have to participate in it.
Can we finish? Can we let Araba finish her points? Well, I couldn't hear it because you were talking.
Just get rid of it.
Araba, can you finish?
I said, once again, I'm speaking to the people who say they are displeased with the system.
Got it.
We make so many changes and we try to educate ourselves. We try to vote for different people. We try to do this. We try to do that. If you're continuously not being happy, come up with a different option. That's all I'm saying.
Well said.
All I'm saying.
Well
I'm not
said.
saying I fully agree or I see it working. I'm just saying, let's try it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. If you don't like it, then figure out a way to change it.
It was just more harsh for your ears, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a side conversation over here. Okay, so that's what we talked about, right? But we're F.L.O.W, and we as young adults, and I'll say this confidently because I talk to these team members and I love it. As we enter into the overflow at 5:50, if you want to be in the overflow, look for the link chat inside YouTube. And if you've been a part of the overflow before, the chat is the same. Here's something that I want to leave us, and it's a hot topic. Somebody commented privately. Let me see if I can read this comment. Whew. All right, we're gonna go into the overflow with this. As Christians or even Adventists, we should be conservative and cheer on the side of Republicans. The Democrats' interests are more of like breaking God's laws. Anything goes. However, the policies of the Republicans and their spirit don't welcome the Black and minority into their circles. So we identify with the Democrats more. Their social policies more cater to our needs in the Republicans. So as many of us identifying as Christians on this panel, what are your thoughts about that? The alignment to the political parties based on our Christian beliefs?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I tell people that all the time. Like, as a Christian, there are things that would make me align with the Republican Party. But before a person can know that I'm a Christian, they're going to see that I'm this, right? They're going to see that I'm Black. And my Republican fellow brothers and sisters who are not my brothers and sisters are doing things that do not benefit this more than me being a Christian. So I think the things that relate to my Christianity, like, I can figure out on my own. I don't need them to figure that part out. It's more so about me being Black in America. So that to me is what's more important in terms of the what political side I'm aligning with.
Okay. Ooh, okay, let's finish this. There's a question on the floor, but anyone have any thoughts? Because G Barfi is asking, what about the Republican Party exudes Christian values?
Yeah, I want to know that too. Actually,
I would like to know what about the Democratic Party that it benefits our Black lives. Could somebody tell me? I'm genuinely asking, like, policies like Democrats, or you can confidently say these are the policies why I chose to vote Democrats over Republicans.
I have one in particular. I have one specific.
I want to know. No, I want
for one
Go
gun.
ahead, Susan. I'm going to go to Jay Barfi, but go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just gonna say that's all I had to say. For one gun laws, being against the NRA. That's the one, and that's disproportionately affected.
I will say Bernie Sanders
now.
push for Bernie Sanders.
You don't
Elizabeth
think so?
Warren's
All the black
push.
people get shot, and not just by police, but okay.
But
I will also say
nuances
the
to
lack
that
of
gun law.
college loans. I'm a big fan of for the Democratic Party. Like I'm a good fan of them reducing those numbers
So
drastically.
universal health care.
No,
I'm talking about
some
the
of the
peace support-
Senate,
And the
people in the
Democratic
Senate.
people. Anyway, go ahead, Simone. You got a comment.
No, I was just going back to what you said. G. Barfi asked in the chat. One thing that I can think of off the top of my head, which a number of other people I know talk about it or reference, I should say, is the Republicans and their anti-abortion laws, right? And as the Adventist church as a whole, not individuals, but the Adventist church as a whole is also pro-life. So people would find like that is where, in terms of Christianity and stuff, they would align more with the Republican Party. That's just one example that comes to my head.
I also feel like a lot of Adventists.
Robert, can you a little bit louder?
Can you hear me now? I don't know why. I don't know why.
I just want to make sure we hear you.
Okay. I think a lot of Adventists align with the Republican Party because of their stance on homosexuality as well. It's not my personal agreement, but you know how Adventists feel about homosexuality, and so
it's a conversation.
Well, I mean, so the reason why I'm iffy on that is because although we may not agree, we at least some of us agree that people have the right to choose.
Right.
And I think that's one of the tenets of or the positions of the Democratic Party is that people have the right to choose or have the right to
choose marriage.
To choose, period.
No, I don't. I honestly don't think a lot of
someone and then choose it and then having marriage.
They have the right
to choose. What Araba is saying, I think, where Christians align with Republicans is that when you talk about marriage and now that's institutionalized, they're against that, so they line up with Republicans in that way. So maybe not necessarily the choice to choose like in life to be with somebody, but to marriage.
I guess then my position is that people should be able to choose who they
want. Yes, but I think overall, she's saying
overall in general.
She's saying
I think I don't want to say the majority, but I think a good chunk of people in the Christian faith don't agree with that. You know what I'm saying? So
it's 5:50. And so I know this is going to be hot. We have some people that are ready to get into the overflow. So we're about to transition into the overflow. So let's hold up a second and you will be able to come onto the chat and have a conversation with our panelists as is. So let's get ready to roll into it. All right, I guess that is the sign of us going into the overflow. So we do have someone on here, Victor Marcel. You look in the link, there's a link in the chat if you want to join us live in the overflow, and you can also email us at 2flowpresents. So Victor, what are your thoughts? Do you have anything you want to ask the panelists? And if you got we'd love to see you on the camera if it helps, but it's okay if you just want to ask us the question. Make a comment. Victor. That's Gifty.
Hey, Gifty.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it. I knew there was an energy behind those questions.
So just waiting for
well, okay. Well, we can just go on. So the question, there was a question on the floor.
I just had a comment about Simone. What Simone had said, and which is my thing in terms of this conversation is really educating, pushing education for voting, just making sure that people are knowledgeable. Because when you talked about Simone, pro-choice and pro-life, a lot of people, they don't really understand what those things mean. They hear pro-life or pro-choice and think, oh, I want, you know, the baby to live or whatever the case is. But a lot of times we don't understand that some of these, I guess, pro-life, they are against like certain, what are they called? Like certain, what is it called? Like access to certain things that, like the programs for young mothers, a lot of them are against that. So just educating yourself on what programs are out there and really what does pro-life or pro-choice mean? So even that is really educating. So my thing is, regardless of who you vote for, you need to educate yourself on the things that you're voting for.
And I will take the
agree.
stance and position because I know that I have a Gifty on here and I know who I'm talking to, so I can bring all my energy because I know she's gonna come back with everything she got. I think.
Oh yes, Sinclair emailed you.
I know, I already got it. Okay, Gifty, go ahead, Gifty. I'll wait. Go ahead, you got a comment. You just unmute yourself, Gifty, and go ahead and... Oh, she's so polite. You sure you're not gonna accuse me of being using my power as a man? In all seriousness,
Don't gaslight her now, Rob.
Anywho, I want to Gifty, you met the comment about involvement in the conference level and relating to voting and things in the church. I want to say to you, the education that Alexia is talking about, I think we need to be aware of, particularly in our church. The structure of the Adventist church is very much so based on the power of the people. Like business meeting, if you want something to happen, you can go to a business meeting and you can not only ask about it, you can demand it and demand that it be voted on. And there's the things that I've had to learn on as an elder. And what I really want to encourage us to be mindful of is that the same issues that we have in our communities in the world and us with the federal government, we have those similar difficulties with our local church. And my thing is, I think we need to get involved. Like, I think we need to recognize that we have the power to change some things. And I want to acknowledge that, like in any process of change, there's going to be some discomfort, there's going to be some hurt, there's going to be some loss. There are going to be some old folk that aren't going to want to listen to you. There are going to be some old folk that are going to try to speak down to you. Okay, let's acknowledge that and let's still show up. Right now, if we were to think about a church right now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 young adults right here that can bring something. They won't be able to ignore, they can ignore my one voice, maybe. They might be able to ignore my 2 voices, but they won't be able to ignore our 6 voices. They won't be able to ignore it. And I'm thinking about things at a conference level. Like when I went to that meeting, and again, I'll leave the conference out of it because I need to be mindful. I never know, I may get a future job. So I need to be, be slick with it. My thing is, it shouldn't, the makeup of that level should not be predominantly male over 50. Not when we say we're trying to minister to this group specifically. And when I tell you, I saw things that honestly just turned me off. And so I really think that we need to recognize our power and get involved, because then, like a Robert's point, which I love, Robert, when you worded what you said, I was with it. Like, if you're gonna complain, but you're not gonna do nothing about it, then shut up, right? But if you don't like it, and if you don't like the way that it is, then I 1,000% encourage you to figure out a way to change it. Like, bring a solution to the table. And I think, Araba, if I heard you right, that's what you were saying. Like, if you're going to complain about it, if you don't like it, then bring something different to the table and let's talk about it. If not, then hush up. Oh, it's Papa album. All right, go ahead, Gifty. I'm ready.
Okay, all right. All right, so my response is basically twofold to the whoever asked that question in regards to believing that the Adventist church should be Republican. I think it is so laughable because a lot of Christians, not just the Adventist church that I know, staunchly believe in being Republican for the simple reason of LGBTQ rights and abortion and stuff like that. But what they do not understand is that the Republican Party, when they talk about Christianity, they're talking about evangelical movement. And the evangelical movement is actually very anti-Adventism. So for a lot of you guys who are thinking about aligning yourselves with that, look up the evangelical movement and how much money they have invested into politics and how much money they have invested into keeping the 1% and everybody else down. Number 2, a lot of the people in the Republican Party are very much against socialist ideas such as, taxation education and allowing everybody equal opportunity to healthcare, food, and just simple basic necessities, education, things that allow for gerrymandering, redlining, and stuff like that. That is the popular Christian movement. So if you want to think about joining or aligning with the Republican movement, now I'm not advocating for the Democratic Party at all, because I definitely believe that they have issues, and do what you want, but I just want people not to reduce being Republican to superficial ideas such as just abortion and just LGBTQ rights, because think about it, you have a lot of homeless LGBTQ plus people who have been kicked out by their lovingly Christian homes and are on the street with nothing. And then you also have the foster care system where it is not supported by the government, because these same Republicans are stripping away a lot of these socialist programs that would allow for money to go into kids in these homes and allow them to have a greater leg, with stuff like that. So Adventists, and I'm speaking of Adventism because I guess I am Adventist, although I do identify more as Christian, but I grew up in an Adventist church, definitely need to reconsider that. Number two, in terms of my comment about why exactly we're trying to correlate Adventism with politics, I get the correlation that was being made. My comment was mostly geared to the fact that, one, Adventism, again, because a lot of Adventism, actually, a lot of the things that we're taught, it's not actually biblical. It is coming from a lot of Catholicism and evangelical movements. A lot of it is rooted in there, which is also rooted in patriarchy. A lot of things, like in terms of, like you talked about, Rob, there being a majority of men. That's the fact that Adventists are arguing about women being able to become pastors. That's still, we haven't even crossed the bridge to allowing women to go into like greater places like the Greater Conference. That's number one. That's number one. Another point is, as somebody who grew up in the Adventist system, I'm talking about schools and everything. Adventist schools are just so, everything is just so subpar as to how things are matriculated, whether you have women in power or not, or like young people in power. At the end of the day, Adventism needs to change from the General Conference level. That's really what it is.
Hold on.
Fosters racism and separatism and all of that within the church. And when you look at that, you have rich Adventists, white Adventists, and old male Adventists. And they want you to believe that, yes, the people have a voice. And I just personally, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but from my observation and my experience in the Adventist church, it is a falsehood, and it's not the case, because I don't know who's the president, who's the vice president. And I've been to every single Adventist. I used to participate in business meetings and all of that. I still don't know who these people are. Where do I go to vote? Where do we go to vote as a church? I've been to every camp meeting. What's going on? Anyway, that's just my little 2 cents, but I'm not disagreeing with you, Rob.
You call that 2 cents?
No.
Okay, first of all, let's talk about your math in your comment. But I want to say I agree. Simone's going to go after me, and then we're going to jump to Victor, because he was on here, and then I see that Cherie's on here as well. So Gifty, I'm actually going to say I agree with like a majority of what you said, except for how we change the system, because I strongly believe that the men are able to remain there, right, in these positions of power, because we have not, again, exercised our individual power to vote at our local level. That is my stance. Simone, and then Victor. What?
I don't agree with a lot that was said, but I think your last point, Gifty, probably got me the most, and I just wanted to get some clarification on what you were saying about voting. You said you've been to business meetings and such, and you said how are these GC individuals voted in? You said you don't know how it's done. I just wanted to understand.
Yes, that was my point. Also, like in terms, my business meeting comment was more so to Rob talking about us being active on our church level. I do remember going to business meetings at my church, and what always end up happening is now I got to argue with some older church people as to why I believe what I believe. And after stating my claim, it still doesn't get, like there's no, it just comes off as you're young, you don't know the Bible. And here's the thing, I'm a very nosy person and very inquisitive. And before I've even opened my mouth, I've looked it up. I've already questioned, and I just think the question is wrong. But because a lot of our belief is rooted in tradition and not really biblical truths, a lot of times people are going off of like, what do we
what did my parents tell me? Or like, you know, like jewelry, for example. The amount of people I had to argue with over jewelry, I'm like, where is the biblical standpoint? Where? And they cannot, they just like, well, it's not good. We don't do it. That's it.
Okay, so I can understand. I can understand some of that, but I think you've also made a lot of gross generalizations, and we have to be careful with that. So when you talk about the Adventist school system being some subpar, that to me that's not a fair statement to make. Maybe the school systems that you went to, but to say that all across our school systems are subpar, that's not a good statement to make. And I've attended Adventist schools on all levels. So I know what I'm saying, that I know what I'm saying, and I can attest to it. So let's be careful with the generalization.
And I completely understand that what I said, again, my opinion is purely my opinion, but what I am saying is I have been to Adventist school across all levels as well, K all the way to college. In my humble opinion, it's a part. It's a lot that the church could do more, that I just feel like for the amount that people are paying, what are we actually reaping from it? But that's just my.
Okay, right. So the schools that you attended, because you didn't go to every Adventist
school. No, this
is
just my opinion of Adventist.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So we have to be careful with generalizations, right? When we say Adventist schools, we're now talking about every school that exists, and that is not the case.
And again,
right?
I appreciate my personal opinion.
Okay.
I gotta jump in and moderate.
You also talked about how does voting work. If you say that, how did you figure out voting works in the broader society? Right? Somebody maybe pointed you towards that. You did some research. The same thing happens in the church. You want to know how voting takes place? We do a little bit of research and we figure it out. Nominating committee, I really don't think is that difficult of a process. It happens every year or 2 years in local churches. Conferences tend to do it every 4 or 5 years. And so it goes on with the union and up to GC. It's really not rocket science. So I think what happens is whatever we choose to find out information on, that's what we then go and research. And the things that maybe don't suit us at that time, or we don't want to pay much attention to, then we tend to ignore it. And that's where we need to be careful, not only when it comes to the larger society, but with the church. I don't agree with everything that happens within the Adventist church, but I'm also still very protective of it, the same way I'm protective of my family. I don't agree with all my cousins or everything my parents say all the time, but I dare someone come and make gross generalizations about them, because that's still my family. And I think we need to be careful of that, especially on this platform where we're talking to a larger public. That's it.
Thank you. So I'm going to draw some things out here. We have Victor, who wanted to make a comment, Yolanda, Simone, and then Cherie. I see you on here. I'm sorry if I didn't say it in the right order. I was trying to track it, but let's start off with them. Simone Walton, to be specific to, not Simone, our team member. So Victor, let's go. You got the clock. We have to get our clock up, y'all, because the overflow is getting hot. So please be mindful of the clock. I may mute you. It is out of respect and love. So don't come from my neck. All right, go ahead, Victor.
So it's not Victor, it's Simone.
Okay, go ahead, Simone.
The equally better half of Victor.
Equally better half? Wait, what?
I really did appreciate what Simone said, the other Simone, who's probably even a better part of this Simone, but we really need to educate ourselves. And I'm going to encourage you guys to really educate yourself about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? There were young people who were at the forefront of beginning this church. The Seventh-day Adventist Church actually has been at the forefront from its inception on social issues. We are not perfect and we still have ways to go, right? But this church, its schools, its education, its health system, right? We really need to educate ourselves about it. If you want to find out how the process goes with getting to the General Conference and to elect General Conference officials, it's kind of the same thing with your local politics. You have to get involved. You have to understand how things work. And you can't just sit on the sidelines and complain. And you can't sit on the sidelines and say the church is this, the church is that. You are the church. You guys have done so many programs saying that we are the church. So get involved, educate yourself, understand how the systems really work, because this is such a pivotal opportunity and time for us. And as for the person who's talking about Republicans or Democrats. It's not about that. It's about God, and God gives the power of choice. That's the greatest gift that he gave us. So, it's not about homosexuality, abortion, right? Understand what each party is saying, understand what the platforms are, and then make informed choices. Don't just choose because I'm Black, I'm this, because I'm white, I'm that, whatever. Make informed choices. And Araba, I appreciate that class. I took it when I was at Howard too. So we should talk. Yes, ma'am. HU for life. Class of 1993.
Okay.
Take the time. Take the time.
Okay, let's
Another bison, guys. That's another bison.
let's go down
All day, every day.
I'm doing too much.
Let's go down to Yolanda and then Cherie. If you still have a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Cherie. And that's my homegirl, Cherie. You guys knew her. She was on one of our other panelists too. So, Yolanda, you with us still? You there? I don't know.
Yes, I'm here. It's Yolanda. But everyone knows me as Raquel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, Raquel.
But I would like to say I appreciate everyone's comments already. I also appreciate Gifty's comments, that while it's good for us to acknowledge the good that's there, it's also good for us to acknowledge the issues that we also have, so that we can also address them, because I think oftentimes we do highlight the good that the schools and what the church has done. I don't want to downplay the good that it has done, but there's always room for improvement, right? And if we just focus on one, then we won't be able to focus on the other. And I also agree a lot with Rob's point, because I know when I was an elder in the church, we had endless conversations, Sabbath lunches, where people were just voicing issues that they had. And I would beg people to come to church business meeting, and they would not come. And I will tell you the issues that they faced the one time 3 young adults came to business meeting, people started listening after that because they were very vocal. And I do understand that, like, yes, the church system is clunky. Yes, sometimes we go and we don't see change immediately. But like with everything else, we're not going to see change immediately. We need to keep going consistently. We can't go once and then stop. And, oh, they didn't listen to me. It's like you have to keep going and keep going and keep going until your voice is heard. But I think a lot of times we just say, oh, they didn't listen to me. I'm just going to stop going because they didn't listen to me. And I appreciate the frustration, but like, I think the underlying frustration is still there, even if we don't go to business meeting, because then we continue to have our Sabbath lunches where we voice our frustrations. But that's just me. So.
Okay. That's agreeable spirit, y'all. Fellow elder. Cherie, are you still there? Because I know you have something powerful to share. Hopefully you're still there.
I'm still here, but I have 2 children, so they might be kind of loud.
That's fine.
But I just wanted to thank you guys for this conversation. I think in lieu of all of Donald Trump's antics and everything that's happened to us since he's been president, the fact that we're even having this conversation about the importance of voting is like very telling. And I think that it shows that progress is being made as far as our thinking. I think in the last election, people really weren't ready to have this conversation. And I'm thinking back to something that Susan said about whether we're able to get on the same page. And as much as I would love to vote on my individual interests, I just don't think that as a collective, like as far as my identity as being Black, and I'm speaking from a non-Black immigrant perspective, I don't think we have that privilege to vote on an individual basis. I think we have to really think about our collective and what's best for us. And so that was my little throw in. So I don't know if any of the panelists want to give.
I agree with you. Just to start off, I'm sorry. I'm also passionate about this because I know as a team we talked about it and it was a hot topic. We wanted to talk about how politics plays a role in everything. And that ends up why the topic for the next couple of Sabbaths or Saturdays are going to be politics, and because the reality is it does influence every level of our lives. If we're willing to open our eyes to that, like politics and education, politics and pop culture. I mean, in all honesty, I think we have to look at the fact that Kanye is a part of this conversation does speak a lot about where we are as a society and what that means for our level of awareness about politics and about what it means. And we do need to, as a community, and I believe it was Chandra and Susan that talked about this, and Cherie, you're highlighting it, as a community, we have got to come together and ask the difficult questions of ourselves and then come together to vote. Like, I think we really need to have these panel discussions where we, oh, I don't like you, blah, blah, blah. But when we leave the discussion, right? When we leave the discussion, say, well, we're all gonna vote for this. Because then our power will be felt. Or we're gonna say, hey, we're all not gonna patronize this place because our power will be felt. Like, just like in a family, when the door closes in the house, right? You, but when you leave out that door, okay? We all gonna be
so
family.
when are we having a private meeting to talk about what we're going to do?
So
Right.
I think, Cherie, that's a great question. That I believe for me, I know an action item that I put out to our F.L.O.W community, anyone watching this, is the first step. I challenge everyone to be aware of the next local election in your area. For me, that is I know I'm looking at PG. I already know that the elected positions are the sheriff and are the Board of Education. So my challenge, state's attorney. So I'm actually going to keep myself abreast of what's happening in those areas. And then as a Christian, I know in my church, I'm telling anybody that is a part of the Adventist church or my church at Metro, come to the next business meeting, y'all. Talk to me. I am an official elder. If there's something you don't like about what we're doing in church, come talk to me so that I can, at the very least, if you don't go, I'm gonna say something at business meeting. But I prefer if we went together and said it together. So those are my action items, Cherie. So you and I think you're in the PG County, Cherie. I don't know. Are you DC?
Oh yeah, PG.
Okay, so I think let's talk about, okay, the next sheriff, right? Let's then have a meeting before it's 4-year election. I need to check when the next one is, but then let's gather our team, people that we know, and say, hey, this is what's happening. Do we want to vote for this guy or not?
What are these policies? What are we going to be asking of this person to do if once they're in office and things like that?
And also keep in mind that there are bills that are always being proposed throughout the year. So it's not just like a one-time. You have bills that are currently being proposed and are voted on. So educating yourself on those bills as well, because a lot of things are being passed within the past 5 months for a lot of different states that we still have no clue what has been passed under our nose.
To continue on Alexia's point, knowing the bills and then making sure you're present at the council meetings, the local council meetings, to speak on those things. If you disagree with something that's being passed, because us knowing those things is one step, but then being able to speak to our local council members and state representatives to make sure that they understand that we're not standing for certain things is something that we need to be heavily involved in as well.
What are some facts? I hear what we're all saying, and I hear what I'm saying in terms of educating ourselves, but how do we, as young people, make that practical for ourselves? How do we actively, because a lot of us here have full-time jobs or whatever the case is, some of us have children, how do we make sure that we are all actively doing these things? And this is not just a conversation that we leave and then we wait until the next full conversation to still talk about it.
Go ahead, babe.
Oh, I was going to say really quickly, I think it starts with looking to see when some of these meetings are. I think we have the luxury now of attending a lot more of these things because they're virtual. So it's also for, there are some, right now there are, I keep mentioning it, some council elections coming up in November, and there are forums that happen every week with all of the council members, making sure you're on those Zoom calls to hear exactly what these people are talking about. I think that's one thing that we can do, and ask all our questions then.
I agree.
So I think that was actually what I was going to build on. If F.L.O.W, right, for any of those who are watching, and we appreciate, the team appreciates all our loyal ones out there, right, the ones who ride with us all the time. If F.L.O.W hosted and managed to put up a situation where we were able to host representatives speaking to us, and I'd love to hear it in the chat, and those here, would you attend? If we created the platform, right, where we said, okay, this sheriff or this education board member is going to come and speak to us as young adults and members of the Maryland, state of Maryland or District of PG County, would you attend? Yes. I got one yes from a team member.
Yes.
Sandra says yes.
Sandra says yes.
I see yes. Cherie says yes.
Got it. All right. So then I think that's something that the team and I will work on, and I'll spearhead. I'll make sure I'll take the responsibility for doing that myself. And also, we'll close. This is a hard thing, but we're going to close with this question for the overflow. I'm gonna give everyone a minute and a half to address this if they want. Should Christians align themselves with a particular party? I brought it that way. If so, which? Anyone who wants to answer in the overflow, you got a minute and a half to go for it. Should Christians align themselves with a particular party view? If so, which one?
I'm going to answer this. I think Christians should align themselves with any particular party view. It's their personal opinion. I just don't think people should reduce it to superficial things. I think they really need to seek the policies of each political party and be able to defend it outside of, well, I don't believe in abortion, so I'm going to vote Republican without knowing what that party does, or, oh, I believe in free will, I'm going to vote Democrat without knowing what the Democrats do. I think Christians should vote, period. And I think sometimes people like to make the excuse as to why they don't vote as to being like, the reason why they don't vote is because they're Christian. They shouldn't be part of the church and state or whatever, shouldn't mix or whatever, which is nonsense. Because again, that's not a biblical perspective, but that's my opinion.
Really quickly, I'd just like to say that I agree with Gifty on that. I definitely don't think we should be telling anybody who they should align with, though. So I'm not going to say what party a Christian should align with. I think that's their personal opinion and conviction. And I also do agree, again, like she said, about not reducing it to, oh, you know, LGBTQIA, they support that, so I'm not voting for them. So that's my opinion. But Cherie also had something to say, it looked like.
Oh, I was going to say absolutely not. I think that Christianity in itself is just so diverse. Like, you have members of the queer community who are also identify as Christian, regardless of how you may feel about that. So I think people in that instance have to really look at how, you know, these laws and policies would affect their individual identities as Christians, because I think it's kind of complex. So that's my opinion.
Anyone else? Simone, that's you? You about to go in?
Yeah, I agree with Cherie. I don't think Christians should align themselves with the political party. Christians are not homogenous. Christianity is vast, and there are all types of individuals that fit into the bucket of Christianity. So you should align yourself with God, first and foremost. The Bible says, render unto Caesar's the things that are Caesar, and render unto God the things that are God. So vote, pay your taxes, right? You know, all those other things. And you make an informed decision and choice. And really, that's between you and God. So I am never going to tell anybody, be Republican, Democratic, Independent, Progressive. You got to work that out for yourself.
I just want to speak on behalf of our absentee member, Dylan Thomas, who says, who says Christians should align themselves with the Christian party. We don't have an actual party. I think we should vote Devon Franklin for president. The end.
It's interesting because I actually had this conversation with my mom, who they actually had the general election for Jamaica a couple of days ago, and she was talking about how Christians shouldn't align with a party, or she didn't some people didn't vote, and she was like, that's fine. But then I also think we have a responsibility as Christians that if we see, like, politics plays a part in, like, the lives that it affects marginalized people who are poor, it affects our lives and the lives of people around us. And while we're also living for heaven, we also have a responsibility to try to make an impact here for the better. And whether we like it or not, I think politics is a part of how that actually occurs. So in terms of aligning with a specific party, I can't tell you which party to go and align with. I think it's a choice. Do I want to say Christians as a body or Christians individually? I think that's just a choice that each person has to make in terms of which party they're going to make an educated choice to align with, but I do think we have a responsibility to be involved and to exercise our right to vote. And as a part of that, you do have to pick a side, so that's my 2 cents.
I think the other Simone had a comment. No? Okay. Anyone else? Monique, we haven't heard from you, man. Okay, she's good. And did we lose Araba, Chandra? Before we wrap up with one last thing?
I'm here. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this conversation was important. I guess I'm just a little unenthusiastic because I just kind of feel like I'm voting just because what else am I going to do? I just want Trump out of office by any means necessary. But yeah, that's just how I feel. So it is what it is. Let's just do what we have to do and make it. Or if you really want change,
why she got louder?
Revolution.
She's louder for the revolution.
Overthrow the government.
All this talk, it's dandy, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the same cycle for years and years to come.
I just want to say the views expressed by those of the F.L.O.W team members do not represent all F.L.O.W team members or the Advantage Church at large.
I was joking.
Just want to be careful. I want a job. AEC, I'm still here. All right, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I was gonna say from Araba's comment. I think a lot of people feel the way you're feeling. You're not the only one, and I think that as we discuss over the course of this month, hopefully we'll come up with some action items on how we can make the next election not just another election, and even the semi. What are they? The midterms, not just another, I'm hoping that we can come together with a group of people and really sit down and be strategic about how we're voting and, the conversations that we're having with people our age and younger.
So that was a great wrap up. And I'd like to just emphasize what we've talked about here, what my wife just said. Please follow F.L.O.W, like, subscribe. We're not just young adults. We're not adults just talking the talk. We believe that needs to be changed, and we're trying to put action to our words. We are trying to be passionate, and not just passionate, but we're trying to make sure that our passion results in something. We want fruit to be born from our tree. Like you heard it, for our local election, we will look to have our whoever is vying for those particular platforms to join us in conversation so they can speak with us. For the church elections, I'm telling you, please come talk to me, right? If you are not liking something that's happening in your church and you're a part of a particular church congregation, I might even have to be a part of your church congregation. If you want me to show up as a young adult, right, just to support you, just to add numbers to it, let me know, because I think we have power that we need to utilize. Also, we are trying to raise funds for outreach. We're not just talking about it, we're trying to be about it. Inside the YouTube chat is a link to a Google form. If you would like to order a t-shirt, we're trying to raise $1,000 to support kids in school. We want to do snacks. We want to make sure that they have food for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. And we have a basic goal of $1,000, $20 t-shirt. You can get the Black Lives Matter t-shirt, which you see there, or you can get a regular plain F.L.O.W t-shirt, which will have graphics for you soon. Just $20, y'all. $20. It goes entirely to the ministry. We don't get paid yet. We're working on it, but we don't get paid yet. And all we want to do is make sure that we can support our community in tangible ways. We want to really put our money where our mouth is. And we want to make sure that people realize that church isn't just people going into a building once in a while. It's helping, it's supporting, it's loving, it's growing. So you want to thank everybody. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you haven't already. Next week, we're going to talk about politics and pop culture, I believe. Politics and pop culture. You're going to hear it from me here. Make sure you listen carefully. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about Kanye. We're going to talk about WAP. We're going to talk about all the things that are impacting our community now, right? How do we make America great again? What does that look like, right? How does that impact? So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank my team members. We did it. If you want to be a panelist, feel free to email to flowpresents@gmail.com. If you'd like to be a panelist, please email to flowpresents@gmail.com. We love you. We appreciate you. You guys have a great Saturday.